invite Shankar and Varun. I'll just give a quick context on what's the topic they are going to discuss. So Shankar and Varun are going to discuss about enforcing AI transparency, the transparency toolkit, enforcing explainability, technical mechanisms for accountability. So they may be briefing any sorts of open source audit framework or some sort of certification pledges, like a glass box which the industry can take. So I think both of them have spent a lot of time in the industry. Varun have done entrepreneurship and a lot of robotic stuff, as like even Robin, and Shankar have done a lot of services industry, and he has been now championing AI ethics. So AI governance and data strategy leader, building trustworthy AI ecosystem, transforming enterprises with responsible AI. Varun Sharma has been an investor, founder, humanitarian, innovator, co-founder at a MetaFA Labs, which got sold. Without much ado, I'll hand it over to you, Shankar.
Thanks, Sean. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Depending on where you are, or good evening. So now, as part of this Trust in AI summit, we all understand in terms of the need for trust, accountability, and transparency in AI at this age. And this requires, a lot of systemic changes that needs to be brought in, which is why, we are here. And we will look at in terms of some of the technical mechanisms that might need to be looked at as part of achieving this AI transparency. And I have, spent, significant effort in terms of reviewing the level of AI transparency that a lot of AI players are, claiming themselves to be. And I've also, let me just share my slide. Give me 1 second. Yes, one more minute. I'm just.
I want to thank Varun. Varun, it's very late for him in Europe, and I know that many of you guys are also joining from Europe. Thanks a lot. I think despite it's very late in Europe, you guys have been with us, and that shows the commitment for the topic. Good.
Okay. Let me know, if you're able to view the screen. Sean, you're able to view
Yes,
the
sir.
screen?
Yes, sir.
No?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Okay. So we will kind of, start with what I call as the AI transparency theater, just to highlight in terms of, what the current scenario where everyone claims the transparency to be, as well as in terms of where they are actually at this point in time. So if you look at it, there was a MIT research which kind of looked at more than 18,000 AI papers and found that less than 1% actually had proper empirical evidence that will help us understand in terms of how AI actually functions. So it's not enough in terms of saying that we are trying to kind of provide enough transparency, explainability, but how much they are able to actually showcase, demonstrate the same. If you look at it, it's less than 1%. Similarly, there was a McKinsey report that said that, based on the survey they conducted, 40%, more than 40% of the companies said that explainability is a key risk. But at the end of it, less than 17%, less than 20%, that way, are actually working in terms of mitigating that particular risk. And as I was alluding to earlier, I've spent, quite some time reviewing the AI transparency level across various AI players and had developed a framework which looks at, 10 different, key pillars on AI transparency. And what I have given as a snapshot on this one is the recent review that was done on the 2025 Microsoft Responsible AI report that they published last month. When you look at it, the Microsoft is scoring only 2 out of 5 in that particular scale for the data disclosures. So no matter, which player that you took, and whether it is Microsoft, whether it is OpenAI, whether it is Anthropic, whichever you look at, you always find that they are always lagging behind in terms of the level of transparency that needs to be provided in terms of their AI models. And at the same time, how much they themselves are able to understand and ensure that the AI models that they develop and make it available have enough explainability available within themselves. So that's where we thought that as part of this session, we will look at the level of explainability that is available and what might be a key challenge around that. And then we will also look at, in terms of from the data perspective, the synthetic data, which is kind of, exploding at this point in time, and the kind of challenges that it brings in, and how we would need to look at in terms of addressing the transparency itself from all of these dimensions. And then we will also have Varun, join us in terms of, providing some more perspective from his side across the global regulations and so on. So, moving on to the explainability challenge that we face. Not only the explainability techniques approaches that currently exist at this point in time have its own limitations, but it also throws in a huge gap when you look at the AI to agentic AI jump that we are, experiencing at this point in time. So there is a huge gap in terms of what the explainable AI principles, which look at in terms of transparency, interpretability, justifiability, auditability, and all that they are looking at. But they are not able to cover everything that we would actually require as part of the agentic AI ecosystem that we are, embarking on at this point in time. So if you look at some of those, specific challenges, first and foremost is the dynamic and evolving behavior. It's not going to kind of have a static model that we will be using, but they are going to, once it is deployed, they kind of learn, and then based on the real-time the data as well as the scenarios that they encounter, they are going to make autonomous decisions, and the learning is going to keep on, changing at this point in time. And for all of this, if you look at it, for where the entire the model is going to shift in terms of the experiences, interaction, the changes that will come in terms of the environment and everything. You cannot depend in terms of a snapshot explanation that the current XAI is able to provide, but we will need to look at in terms of how we are able to understand based on their long-term behavior itself to have a proper reasoning behind each and every decision that is being made, every action that is being taken. Same way, if you look at it, it is also going to bring in a lot of autonomous and proactive actions. And these are going to be something that the current XAI frameworks are not designed to kind of, handle. And there will be multiple domains where there will be requiring some kind of constant human prompting as part of the oversight that needs to be considered. And at the same time, the level of autonomous decisions that these models are actually making, that should also be accounted for. Explaining all of this is completely different in terms of how the system works compared to the pre-AI or the AI systems that the XAI frameworks are designed to work on. The same way, I mean, you would also need to look at in terms of the long-term memory and persistent state that current agentic solutions are bringing in. So it not only depends in terms of something which happened, say, past, I mean, day, a week, or so on, but it could even go past, I mean, in terms of the longer time scale that it kind of, I mean, it is able to leverage and use that particular experience, that particular scenario, the training to decide in terms of the autonomous decisions that it would need to take in the future. So, how far beyond, I mean, we are able to go as part of the history itself is something that we will need to look at as part of understanding the AI decision. The same way, you will also have multiple agents that come into play. So not only you are dependent in terms of one specific agent, but when you have a multi-agent interactions, you would need to look at in terms of understanding the entire, I mean, reasoning and the training and everything that happened across each of those agent instances, and be able to understand in terms of how each of those interactions actually, I mean, impacted the overall decisions that the AA agents have actually taken in. And also, if you look at in terms of the current XAI, it'll be looking at in terms of the decision, the rationale behind the decisions itself. While in the agentic era, we are going to be looking at not only the decisions, but we will also need to look at in terms of the various features that are going to be important and which gets picked up by the agents itself as part of its decision making and the action determination. So the way in which we will need to actually have these frameworks, I mean, design would be completely different from how much the XAI is actually able to enable at this point in time, which is why we should probably look at something in terms of explainability in the agentic AI and come up with in terms of the respective standards and frameworks to ensure that, I mean, the transparency is enhanced and how this can be sustained in the long run. Moving into the next, I mean, specific challenge that we wanted to touch upon is the synthetic data. So there, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, uh, in the current scenario, there is a higher explosion in terms of using the synthetic data to complement the gaps that exist in terms of the absence of the real data that is available, both in terms of, I mean, training as well as for building the models itself before it can be made available. And there, if you look at it, the synthetic data brings in additional challenges which currently are not being addressed adequately as part of the various regulations. Even if you look at the EUA Act, which is trying to kind of, I mean, address along with the GDPR and say in US, the California regulations and all, which is trying to kind of address the data disclosures and the transparency. There are a lot of, I mean, gaps that does exist when it comes into the synthetic data. So there, I mean, if you look at the specific gaps itself, one of them is the data disclosure, where you kind of, I mean, expect that the real data is going to be completely available for understanding what kind of biases and the limitations that might have been there as part of the real data that was used. But here, I mean, when you are actually creating synthetic data, it has gone through multiple phases from the real data that was used as part of creating the synthetic data itself. And thereby, you would need to understand all of those nuances before you are able to assess clearly the inherent, I mean, biases and the limitations that might exist within the synthetic data and how it is actually impacting the AI systems which use the synthetic data. And same way, I mean, if you look at the regulations, whatever the bias testing that is being mandated at this point in time, it's not adequately, accounting in terms of the bias that will come in and the amplification that can actually happen as part of the synthetic data generation and the usage in training the AI models. Same way, the explainability standards, we already touched upon. That again, is not able to differentiate in terms of the real and synthetic data in a proper manner. And even the audit frameworks which are currently being used as well as being developed, they lack in terms of the right methodologies that needs to be considered as part of validating the transparency when the synthetic data comes into play. So this is another area which is a big challenge that need to be addressed as part of ensuring the transparency in a sustainable manner. So considering all this, what we were looking at was, in terms of the way forward, there is definitely a need for a standardized, open source frameworks that needs to be developed, standards, that are established in a global manner to ensure that, the explainability is properly implemented by design in the agentic AI systems. We are able to ensure that, democratize the accountability itself so that you are still able to balance between innovation as well as the right level of responsibility and transparency. And you would definitely need to ensure that transparency and auditability is considered as part of the design rather than, as an afterthought. And there is a need in terms of stronger push for vendor pledges so that you have public scorecards, which are, available. Currently, the major A players are, starting to publish, and we are still finding a lot of gaps as part of that. But this has to be, mandated across all the vendors who provide, who are the AI providers. There would need to be regular audits, as well as, the regulations would need to look at in terms of the gaps and identify how the real consequences can be considered to ensure the compliance is brought in to start with before it becomes the kind of a table stakes, and we are able to look further in terms of, what next. Um, so with that, uh, Varun, I would like to invite, Varun to the discussion.
Thanks, Shankar. And I think I would probably begin with a little note of apology if I sound sleepy, if I sound tired. It's been a pretty long day for me. Uh, but also, I think it's pretty important that we also begin with the reason why all of this thing began and, you know, the unfortunate tragedy which happened with Suchir and who was very much aligned with the right ethos of building technology, which not a lot of people have the courage to do that. And also, I think personally, it's something which hits quite close to home because I remember very closely that I think I was delivering a keynote at the Santa Clara Convention Center when Balaji had approached me to, and he was so proudly describing the works of Suchir and how he wanted us to connect and probably see if we can explore more on the, uh, again, the ethos of responsibility, right? But unfortunately, the next message which I get from Balaji was the fact that, this all has happened, and I'm, I'm very grateful for everybody who's on this panel because I'm sure to a certain sense they agree with the fact that I think we all need to come together collectively as a group and find ways to at least establish certain frameworks for responsibility. And with that being said, as a personal preference, I would like to keep it more
Just,
so as a
just to quickly
larger group.
tell you, Varun,
Yeah,
the fact that Balaji told about some example you gave about AI ethics long ago in a conference before even Suchir's demise.
yeah,
Suchir's father Balaji said he met you in one of the conferences where you gave an example about AI ethics and how the industry is
yeah,
so fanatic about the positive side of it, but without looking at the ethics aspect of it. And he was very
yeah.
sincere about me wanting to connect to you so that you can also be part of this. Thank you for taking time out. Over.
Thank you so much. He's very kind with his words. But that being said, I think because we have a small group of people with similar minds, my ideal preference would be to, even though if I mention, I'll probably begin with a very small, but I'll quickly run through presentation and again, I'll apologize for the lack of efforts if you see complete plain text on a plain presentation. But beyond that, I think it's best because it's a closed room, it's a small room. If we treat this more as a brainstorming session rather than just me giving a monologue
Yeah.
in a very deeply sleepy state. So I think with that, I will try to share my screen and just one sec. Please let me know if you could see my screen.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Varun.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. Yeah. So I'm sure Shankar has very deeply and very nicely touched on, when we talk about air transparency, what exactly are we inferring to? And just as a part of an extension, I think I would be delving more on the black boxes which exist. And to be honest, when we talk about transparency, we cannot truly achieve transparency until we understand the black boxes which exist. So hopefully, in the next 2 to 5 minutes, I can put a structure to the black boxes that exist. Probably when we talk about transparency, right now, what are the gaps in transparencies? And in my personal opinion, I put these two black boxes in kind of two very different layers. The first is the black box of the data which has been used, and of course we have seen the decades of hard work of artists just completely taken over by ruthless training and very unethical practices. But the second line of the black box is something which truly scares me. And probably to begin with, I'll just put out the words of what this race to AGI has been, right? In a little bit of technical terms. So more or less, from bird's eye view, it's like, a couple of concentric circles put together in the sense that, you give enough data to enough compute, completely unsupervised, have a reinforcement learning pipeline into the picture, and you have your AGI. But the issue over here is nobody truly understand that how these patterns are, kind of forming on the other end of the table. And right now, nobody truly cares, right? Because everybody's in a race to just, push as much as possible, probably score the best in the RKGA benchmarks, but nobody's truly diving into the first principles of understanding that what is, from this input, what's leading to that output, and what's causing these, complex patterns with the machine is kind of, forming during this process and during this inference. And that's where it puts out um, a very big gray area because we are just leaving a very powerful technology uh, in a complete, you know, do not know space. And if he continues this thing further, I think, there needs to be some part of b- regulatory as well as, corporate frameworks which need to be in the place. And although from my side, I have had the privilege of working very closely with, the top sovereigns and the you know the ministers of today responsible for a lot of these policy making. But again, regulatory frameworks could only prevent too much. I think we need to develop much larger systems for ensuring that transparency comes in both forms, from data it's ethically sourced, as well as transparency in the sense that why is our what is the model leading to these particular results. And as Shankar very deeply emphasized in the fact that explainability needs to be kind of supported more broadly. But another kind of a parallel instance to that is that when we talk about explainability, that in itself is something which is very opaque. And probably I'll cite one small example for that. I think the Anthropic team did a small experiment to understand how these chain of thoughts are working. And from what they inferred, they asked it for a justification to a certain math problem. And what they realized that the explainability, which is also coming out from the model, that also seems to be fabricated. That's not how the AI actually thinks, as well as that's now how the AI essentially comes to that particular deduction. So that leads to a much, much, much complicated issue that if we are not even aware of how things are happening from A to B, I think there's a lot which could go wrong, especially now AI entering into the arms race, right? AI entering into all of these sensitive areas, which impacts everybody, including you and I. Uh, and I think that's essentially what I talked about. We do have a little bit of a regulatory landscape in place, but honestly, uh, I don't know if I should say this, or if I don't know if that's nice to say in this conference, but nobody really knows what's happening, right? Nobody really knows, even the people who are signing these papers off. And again, I said I've had the privilege of being around a few of these people, and I do understand that nobody knows what's happening. So even the acts which are being put into the place, or the policies which are being implemented or enforced all across geographies, right? Nobody really understands any part of it. So, either you leave things to, uh, you know, just general trust, or, you come along with such discussions like what we are having today, and probably form a group of right-minded people to really make sure that things move in the right direction. And I'm not against the rapid advancement of AI or technology. And probably now I'll quote what Balaji keeps saying, but it's the fact that you cannot build a sports car without heartbreaks, right? It's just like you'll drive yourself off the cliff. And right now everybody's building the engine, nobody's really uh looking for the fallback options or the safes which exist. Uh, and of course, that beyond just the threats which exist, it brings around a lot of ethical and social challenges into the picture, and which there have been so many studies with so many bias coming into the picture. And I think somebody from the previous panel also talked about the surveillance and the privacy issues, so I would probably not emphasize on it more, but also the fact that how everything is being coordinated into kind of influencing a lot of neurological patterns into people as well, right? Through deepfakes or disinformation or whatever that is happening. And all of this thing is happening where with absolutely no point of accountability, or at least, no rules in the picture of anybody being held accountable for anything that happens. So, for a lack of a better word, it's the wild, wild west over here. Yeah, although we do see a lot of safety benchmarks coming in, and we do see a lot of governments trying to actively see if they can do something to probably prevent that, or be a kind of a lot fair to the system. But if we are being honest, all of these benchmarks are for the ones who just want to try it out, right? None of this is actually enforced in the real world deployments. And I think even if we enforce all of these regulations into picture, right, there's only limit to which you could limit these bad actors into the place. So if the issue needs to be solved, it needs to be solved from the base layer itself, right? Before it goes completely and absolutely insane. And yeah, I think conclusion is something which we have already potentially talked about. This is a place where, honestly, as I said, right, I would like to keep it more so as an, open brainstorm between a group of people in a very small classroom rather than me giving a monologue. So I just put together a few questions, probably not right now, but a few questions which are worth at least talking about or just thinking about, right? Because it's like, it's like a dilemma which exists, which nobody has a right answer to. And these questions, of course, include that, while we talk about transparency, that how do we, then really protect the proprietary IP, suppose the proprietary data set if somebody's really putting into. So do we put some audit frameworks or do we put some benchmarks or do we put a limit to the transparency which we are kind of exploring? And then, of course, when we talk about, legislation versus industry self-regulations, right? What would be the fine line between how much should the sovereigns enter and how much should be done on a very corporate framework side and how much self-regulation should happen over there? The third, I think we definitely touched based on is the fact that, current regulations, are they sufficient to foster transparency? Probably not, but again, more than happy to add inputs on any of these questions if somebody, from the large group of people has. And then again, it's very difficult for large data set to actually be completely sourced to where is this picture coming from or where is this particular component of data set coming from, right? So while it looks very, very, kind of easy to say in concepts, it's very difficult to implement practically, right? And if we really plan to do that, how do we define those? If some part of the staging data set is ethically sourced or documented, or if we are really able to trace it back to no infringement at all. And again, then comes the push and pull of the fact that if we are open sourcing a model, right, then it leaves an even open room for the bad actors to actually use it for the wrong ways, right? So how do we define these baselines, right? And when we talk about AI providers and transparency, so does that mean they should open up all of their trade secrets or a detailed documentation would work? But in both of the cases, it will still remain as a gray area, right? Because you won't be able to really define if something is happening in the right way or not. And finally, the metrics and the benchmarks, I think that has been the um, highlight of this whole conference from what I believe. And I think with that, probably I will uh, leave the floor open. Perhaps before that, I was very interested in because Shankar very deeply dived into explainable AI, so I had a question of my own to check and see, and would be happy to get some answers from Shankar if he's open to it.
Sure. In fact, if you
Sure.
guys are okay, Shankar, Varun, we can open up also to few questions so that the people can chime in.
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
Yep.
Yes, please. That's the
Yep.
whole point of
Definitely.
this
Sounds
conference.
good.
Yeah.
I think both of you have touched a very great deal of topics around AI transparency, and Varun, you gave even a global picture. Thanks a lot. And anybody wants to ask any question, you can unmute yourself. I have opened it up. Feel free. Go ahead. Shoot any questions for Shankar and Varun. Cool. So why don't you, Shankar, you can chime in some aspects in case if you want to touch upon on Varun's, or if you guys want to give a
Yeah,
wrap up, go ahead, so that I think we can get the next panel.
no, absolutely. I think if I'm sure if you're conscious of time and if the panelists after us are also waiting for us, so I don't think it makes a lot of sense to go much deeper into it. But
But
just the
Varun,
final inference, yeah.
whatever list of questions, I think discussion points you have posted, it's very important. I think it looks like they are the moot points where we can conduct some of our future discussions. Please share it in the chat so that we will at least try see if we can capture that and then continue have the dialogue. And thanks a
No,
lot.
no, of course.
Yeah, maybe
No, of
I
course,
can
of course.
just add in a couple of points. On the questions that Varun you had on your slide as well, in terms of how you can balance. The innovation versus the compliance need or the transparency aspects. How you are able to balance it better. So if you look at it, if it is a AI provider, they will need to look at in terms of having the transparency by design, by having various layers in terms of how the transparency itself, the explainability can be kind of included, so that you don't need to open up everything and make it into a too complex model, or too resource intensive, costly affair, but rather you are able to identify the various layers at which you would need different levels of transparency, and how that can be included. The same way, in terms of enabling the auditability also, you would be able to look at in terms of the right set of inputs, as well as the decisions or the actions being taken by the AI are properly time stamped, properly logged for further review. And you don't need to have the entire proprietary model itself open sourced in every scenario, where if suppose the provider has certain proprietary algorithm in place, they would be able to still look at in terms of enabling the transparency and auditability by following these aspects in terms of how they are actually doing it at the design level itself. And wherever possible, make it open source, so that you are able to involve a larger community in terms of both to review as well as to enhance and strengthen it where applicable. So that's something that should always be considered by the larger AI providers to balance in terms of how they are able to still innovate, and at the same time comply, as well as be transparent.
Thanks a lot, Shankar. In fact, this is just a beginning, and as Balaji was saying, we should continue this dialogue. Maybe we can do some deeper dialogues in technical aspects. Varun,
Yep.
Shankar, maybe I will invite you guys to for the future episodes. Maybe instead of a day-long summit, the plan is to have at least evenings, maybe have 1 hour discussion types. That's what we are planning in the future. At least can we do it as like a monthly episode, something of the sort we are planning. So looking forward to have you guys in the future. Thanks a lot for taking time out. Thanks,
Okay.
Varun, for taking
Thank you,
time
guys.
out in the late night and joining us. Thank you.
No, no. Of course, it's
Thank you.
worth it.
Thank you
Bye.
guys for the
See you guys. Take
opportunity.
care. Bye.
Without much ado, I am going to get